Yeah, I'll react to that, sure.
If you
Hold on, guys. Okay. Hi, my name's Connor. I like to learn about things. The original link to the video, top of the description, Discord below that. Love to have you. Let's learn. Let's go. Hope you guys are doing well.
picture London,
Exploring London's hidden medieval metropolis. Awesome.
if you were to picture London in the Middle Ages, you might imagine the Tower of London, Westminster Abbey, or Guildhall. But scratch under the surface, and there's lots more evidence of this medieval metropolis.
I'm Katie Wignall, a London tour guide, and in this series I'm going to be delving into the capital's hidden past. In this episode, I'm seeking out the London of the Middle Ages, a city of narrow streets and soaring spires, almost completely destroyed by the great
Oh, that's strong coffee.
of narrow streets and soaring spires, almost completely destroyed by the Great Fire of 1666 and the Blitz during the Second World War. But despite the devastation and centuries of development, not all of that city is lost.
It's hard to believe that this was built 900 years ago.
Come with me as I discover the hidden remains of medieval London.
Whoa.
I discover the hidden remains of medieval London.
The bottom of the pelvis looks so strange. Like, if you had shown me this bone, is this the coccyx? Coccyx? If you had shown me this bone on its own, I'd be like, that's part of a manta ray or something. I don't know.
London. Our search begins at a site that was back in the 14th century in the countryside, just outside the boundary of the medieval city. The story of Charterhouse stretches back to one of the darkest periods in European history.
In 1348, a terrifying disease swept through London. Today we know it as the Black Death. Thanks to the overcrowdedness and unsanitary conditions of the city, it spread alarmingly quickly, with hundreds dying every day. By 18 months, 40% of the city was dead. Here in Charterhouse Square, I'm standing on the site of one of the largest mass burial pits. It's thought that up to 50...
Guys, do you think, in a sort of messed up way, that stuff like the Black Death could have been healthy for humans? No, not like healthy if you contract it. I mean healthy for the population as a whole. If it's likely that if you're going to die of a disease, you're going to be this sounds kind of messed up. Listen, it's in my head. It's not my fault. That if you kind of... It killed so many people, and it likely killed a lot of elderly people who were probably, had a lot of power, or... It just kind of like you give a slight little restart to a civilization and only very healthy people are around. I'm not saying we should have diseases. It was made a lot more sense in my head. So never
Here
mind.
in Charterhouse Square, I'm standing on the site of one of the largest mass burial pits. It's thought that up to 50,000 bodies are buried in unmarked graves right under my feet.
They remained uncovered until 2013, when work on London's Elizabeth line began in the area.
During the construction of Crossrail, workers came across this macabre sight, and one of the skeletons is on display at Charterhouse.
Scientific analysis on the skeleton displayed at Charterhouse has confirmed the presence of Yersinia pestis in the bones. That's the type of bacteria that cause bubonic and pneumonic plague.
It's surreal to think that this person died during the Black Death, but thankfully we do actually know a little bit about him. He was in the prime of his life, aged mid-20s, and from the DNA isotope analysis of his teeth, we can tell that he was born and grew up in rural East Anglia, and then, like many people like him, he travelled to the big city, maybe in search of work, but it was here that he met his sad fate.
Not long after Europe was released from the worst ravages of the Black Death, a Carthusian monastery was built on this spot, founded by a courtier and favourite of Edward III. It began as a small chapel in 1371 and developed piecemeal over the following decades. Most of the original medieval structures are gone, but not all of them.
This is the only surviving part of the original monastery. And at its height, this would have been twice as long. And it's one side of a four-sided cloister. And all along here would have been cells, the living quarters of the monks.
The cells are now gone for the most part, but the elaborately decorated doorways for some of them can still be seen. The purpose of Carthusian life was total withdrawal from the world, and the monks spent most of their time in isolation in their tiny rooms. They followed a strict timetable of daily prayers, but rarely saw each other. Only on Sundays would they come together to dine and discuss business.
It's in these cells that the Carthusian monks spent the vast majority of their time. Small, quite bare spaces, and their contacts with the outside world was via lay brothers who would bring food and water via these serving hatches. Also, anything that needed to be taken out of the cells, human waste, would come from these serving hatches. Even the calls of nature couldn't interrupt the solitary prayer.
How long are they doing this? If I had Wi-Fi and a computer, I could do that for a long time, but just sort of meditating?
The museum here houses a remarkable document showing that the cells were arranged in a large square around the cloister, a layout copied from other Carthusian monasteries. But the maps themselves had a more functional purpose, as I found out from speaking to the museum manager at the Charterhouse, James Spillane.
So we're looking at this amazing facsimile of a 1430s map. Can you explain a bit what we can see here?
Of course. What we've got here is the great cloister of the Charterhouse, the London Charterhouse, the Carthusian monastery, which was founded at the end of the 14th century. It took more than 30 years to complete the building of this, but around the great cloister, what they've ended up with is 25 cells, each for an individual Carthusian monk. This range of the cloister is the only one that survives today, and you will have seen the doorway of cell B, which is right here today. At the top of the map, which confusingly is the south, those are the church buildings, which were mostly demolished during the Reformation.
And what's this area in the middle of the cloister?
Well, that's the whole purpose of the map. It's a plan of the monastery's running water system. The bottom of the map in the north, you've got springs rising up in Islington, and then pipes that are bringing water all the way up to the charter house, serving running water for each of the monks in their cells, and also the service buildings, the kitchens, which are up here. In the middle of the cloister is the conduit, which is storage for the water.
So it seems unusual to have such a clear depiction from this early in London's history. Is this very rare?
It's unusual to have an image of a medieval building like this, because maps simply didn't exist in 1430s London. So this is a technical document mapping the pipes of the water system, but the value to us as historians today is that it's the earliest depiction we've got of a really significant London landmark, the London Charter House.
The monastery was eventually dissolved as part of Henry VIII's religious breakaway from the Pope in Rome. As a result, much of the original complex was absorbed into later mansions built for the wealthy nobility of Tudor and Stuart England. There are only a few places where the medieval stonework survives.
We're going to see one of the earliest surviving courts within Charterhouse. This is Washhouse Court, and when this was a priory, this area was really dedicated to service. It's where you'd hang clothes out to dry, or pots might be washed. But it's also here that we can appreciate the many layers of the history of Charterhouse. On this side, the white stone is thought to have been part of the original monastic buildings, whereas on this side you have red brick, and this dates from around the 1520s, right before this place was shut down.
Refusing to bow down to Henry VIII's religious authority as the new head of the Church of England, the prior was hanged, drawn and quartered at Tyburn.
I was not smiling at that. I'm not a psycho. Oh, just, that's nice. It's a nice cup there.
New head of the Church of England,
Sorry.
The prior was hanged, drawn and quartered at Tyburn, and 10 monks were sent to Newgate Prison. Some believe the letters IH that form part of the decorative brickwork refer to the Latinized name of the last prior, John Houghton. If so, it was a small act of resistance by the mason. From Charterhouse, we're heading inside the old city of London, the boundary of which was marked by stone walls originally built by the Romans, but later added to and improved.
I'm jealous.
London's Roman wall has changed a lot over the centuries, and here we can see the layers. The white rubble is from the medieval period, and then the red brick is from the 1470s.
I say this so often, but I don't care. This is a microcosm, is that the right term? Of why I think European cities are so much cooler than American ones, is there's so much more civilization. Well, I guess, obviously there were people over here, Native Americans, but they didn't have these large buildings that we had to build around, so it was kind of a blank slate, and you guys just have so much more personality to your cities and your buildings, and so much stuff that I envy a lot, and I hope it doesn't go unnoticed to you guys.
70s.
Sorry.
Brick is from the 1470s.
That's the newer brick.
Many place names in the City of London refer back to the Roman wall. For example, this church in the background is St. Giles' Cripple Gate, named because of its proximity to the gateway in and out of the city.
The modern street London Wall closely follows the line of the fortifications, though only a small section remains. As you walk the route, you may come across another surprising remnant of the old city.
Inside the Roman walls, in fact, leaning up against it, was the medieval church of St. Alphege. It was first mentioned in the 12th century, and then in the 14th century, it was part of a now lost hospital known as Elsing Spital. Today, all that remains is this medieval tower, another victim of King Henry VIII's reforms in the 16th century.
The London Wall extended down as far as the Tower of London, the fortress which guarded the medieval entrance to the city and the crucial crossing point, London Bridge.
Why do I feel like if I were to time travel back to the 15 and 1600s in England, it would seem to me like the scariest. I just feel like someone's going to chop my head off.
The bridge that existed in the Middle Ages no
For
longer
some reason.
stands, but fragments of it do exist, if you know where to look.
This is the church of St.
What did she say?
Middle Ages, point, London Bridge. The bridge that existed in the Middle Ages no longer stands, but fragments of it do exist, if you know where to look.
This is the church of St. Magnus the Martyr, and while it's been rebuilt since the medieval period, what you can still see is this archway, and this was the pedestrian entrance onto the old medieval London Bridge. Just imagine.
I saw a Jay Foreman video about that. Guys, I have to pee real quick. I'll be right back. All right, one sec. Okay. Sorry. I washed my hands. Let's go.
The millions of Londoners who have passed through here over the centuries. But there's more evidence hiding here. These stones, which you could so easily walk past, were part of the old medieval London Bridge. And while we don't know exactly when these date from, the London Bridge started construction in 1176.
That bridge lasted throughout the Middle Ages and survived the Great Fire, which destroyed most of the city. But a new London Bridge was finally opened in 1831, just 30 metres upstream from the original crossing point. That was replaced by the modern London Bridge in the 1970s. That's the one that we'll have to use today as we cross the Thames. If you walked over the old London Bridge, weaving between buildings and shops built onto the structure, no space was wasted. You'd find the homes of some of the country's rich and powerful on the South Bank.
Around this corner lies one of the most magnificent buildings of medieval London. Overshadowed by modern office blocks, this is the last remaining section of Winchester Palace. It was built in the 13th century for the all-powerful bishops of Winchester as their London home.
What we can see here are the remains of the Great Hall, which originally stood right on the bank of the Thames. The gable wall of the hall has doors which led to the buttery, pantry and kitchen, and it has a magnificent rose window.
But this area had a darker side. Connected to Winchester Palace was the notorious Clink prison, where over centuries hundreds of petty criminals, people owing debt, and the local sex workers were held in awful conditions. Interestingly, the Bankside sex workers were actually regulated by the Bishop of Winchester. Their nickname, the Bishop of Winchester's Geese.
Guys, I was thinking about this when I was watching I think it was a simple history video or a infographics show video of like the worst torture method. There's no way people born hundreds of years ago are much different mentally than people now. And so it's scary how we as people today, if we, you know, fell out of civilization a much, could revert to that stuff. We are pretty. I'm sure some of the criminals did stuff that maybe they deserved it, but a lot of the times I'm sure they didn't, and that.
Making a quick getaway from the clink, we're heading north again, back into the hustle and bustle of the city. Located on Cannon Street, our next medieval gem is even easier to overlook. It might not appear that impressive, but this object has an incredible story and origins that are shrouded in mystery.
If you believe the legend, the story of this stone dates as far back as the time of the Trojan Wars. What seems more likely is that this was an important stone in the Roman city of Londinium. The stone is mentioned in a book belonging to the 10th century King Athelstan. He's commonly thought of as the first king of a united England.
It was clearly important in the early Middle Ages, and it remained symbolically significant until the end of the period.
In 1450, the rebel Jack Cade entered the city, and he declared himself the lord of the city of London, striking this stone with his sword. It was a scene that was later dramatised by Shakespeare in his play Henry VI.
If the London stone was at the heart of the city, then for centuries, one of its key arteries was the River Fleet. The river formed the western boundary of the Roman city and was navigable for centuries, allowing small boats from the Thames to sail up into the city and unload cargo. In the 13th century, the river was called the River of Wells, as people used to draw water, giving us the names of places like Clerkenwell. But later in London's history, the river became a foul sewer and was covered over. Very few people know of its existence today.
There aren't many places where you can see the River Fleet, but it is still here. It's just flowing underground. At the corner of Saffron Hill, you can catch a glimpse of the River Fleet if you look down this drain. The River Fleet became part of the present-day sewer system with the construction of Farringdon Road in the mid-19th century. But it still does flow under Farringdon Road today, and then it meets the River Thames just by Blackfriars Bridge.
Outside the old city once again, we're almost back where we started, in open countryside north of the medieval walls. It was here, in the middle of the 12th century, that the Priory of St. John was founded, on 10 acres of land granted by a local Norman baron. This site became the headquarters of the Order of St. John in England, better known as the Knights Hospitaller. The monks who lived here took vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, and were expected to fight in the Holy Land if called upon.
Standing now would have been a large enclosed community, and the gateway to the precinct was just up ahead, and this area would have been used for gardens and kitchens, and a place where the knights would have processed through on their way east to the Holy Lands. Now, just at my feet here, this line is an outline of a large circular nave of the original church.
Like Temple Church, headquarters of the Knights Templar in England, it was built in the style of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, a reminder of the Order's purpose. But while very little of the original complex survives above ground, a few steps below street level is one of London's best preserved medieval crypts.
To believe that this was built 900 years ago. It survived fires, redevelopment, and the Blitz. The round arches from the Romanesque period give way to pointed ones, showing the changes in fashion.
Even the smaller arches like this, I'm impressed by, because I'd imagine that you would really easily, just by compounding errors of getting a little bit off, so that when you get to the point where they all meet, that it would be a little off. But maybe, right?
Give way to pointed ones, showing the changes in fashion in the 12th century. Now, today it's all painted white, but the evidence suggests that once this would have been covered with bright colours.
The stained glass windows down here are backlit by artificial light, but it gives you an idea of how this space would have felt in the 12th century, when the windows would have been at ground level.
These are the original medieval stone benches that line the crypt walls, and they were used by the monks for their chapter meetings where they discussed daily business, but also royal visitors would have come down here. They're not very comfy, so let's hope those VIPs had a cushion to sit on. Rather macabre effigy shows William Weston, and he was the last prior of the Order of St. John. When alive, he was a very preeminent member of Henry VIII's court, but this all went wrong when Henry decides to break with Catholic Rome. On the very day that William finds out that the priory is to be dissolved, he apparently dies from grief, and he's shown here emaciated. This skeletal form is a reminder that despite your status, everyone will return to bones and dust.
Luckily for us, there are many fascinating medieval buildings in London that haven't crumbled away to dust just yet. And the legacy of the old city can be seen and felt all around as you explore the capital, in the street names, places of worship, and centres of power.
I hope you enjoyed this video about the remains of medieval London.
Love history.
If you want to know more about the Order of St. John, we have a whole episode coming up about the Knights Hospitaller. Don't forget to hit subscribe, and I'll see you next time.
Great video as always. The amount of little old gems that I'm sure you guys are so used to, well, I don't want to assume you don't. It's awesome. Obviously, I'm sure a lot of you appreciate it, and it's just me being jealous, I guess. Great video as always from History Hit. I hope you guys are doing well. I'd appreciate any comments at all, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye, guys.